Hey, AB here from B&H, and this video is for any of you out there who just recently got into the world of audio recording. You saved up your money, you bought a little recording system for your home or project studio, and you're on your way. But as a beginner, things can get confusing, especially when you come across audio words or phrases that you're unfamiliar with. So here's a very short list of some of that lingo, and for those of you watching the video, please feel free to add your own audio-related terms in the comments below. Audio tracks versus aux tracks versus buses. For people just starting out recording audio, there can be some confusion as to what the differences are between audio tracks, aux or auxiliary tracks, and buses. So let's break them down quickly. An audio track is simply the audio you've recorded into your project. You can see that audio represented as a waveform in your DAW. It's that simple. Most projects have multiple audio tracks in them. However, if you wanted to process one of those audio tracks you've recorded, let's say add a reverb or a delay, you would do this with an aux track. The aux or auxiliary track will contain the processor you want to use, and you'll send your audio to that aux to dial in just the amount you want. Now you may be wondering, why don't we just output the entire audio track straight to the aux? And you could, but then you'd lose the integrity of the original audio. Using an aux track allows you to blend the original strong signal with the process signal, giving you more control and the best of both worlds. And you probably figured this out already, but when you send the audio track to the aux track, you're using an aux send. Bus. The bus, often spelled with two S's, is a bit different, and simply put, it's the audio path that signal is flowing along. Now, the bus itself doesn't have audio on it, but it's basically playing the audio of any tracks that are sent to it. For example, just like you'd find on hardware mixers, DAWs have a mix bus, which plays the stereo output of all the tracks in a session that are routed to it. Typically, this is the last path in your setup, so if you wanted to add processing to your entire mix, or draw in a fade at the end of your song, you'd most likely do it on this mix bus. In Pro Tools, the mix bus is referred to as the master. A bus can also be used as a way to control a specific set of instruments. In this example, I have all my drums bussed to a drum bus, which allows me to control overall level and apply global processing if I so choose. One other great advantage to having a dedicated bus for a group of instruments is that I can export stems, which are stereo mixes of specific instruments within a project. Think drum stems, guitar and bass stems, keyboard stems, vocal stems, etc. That brings us to bouncing, which in most cases means that you're exporting the entire mix of your session, including all the processing you've done to it, to a stereo file. When you bounce your session, this is where you'll be able to select options like file format, resolution, stereo or mono files, simultaneous creation of MP3 files, real-time versus offline bouncing, and a whole lot more. Also, depending on the software you're using, you can even bounce the individual stems that I mentioned previously in busing. Buffer size. Buffer size is really important when recording and mixing with your computer, because it determines how much data your computer program can handle at a time. This is why it's often recommended that you close all unnecessary applications when using music production software. Now, different buffer sizes have different effects on your computer, and the thing you have to worry about the most is latency. Latency is the delay between the input and the output of a signal, and to prevent this, you need to use a lower buffer size. This is really important during the recording phase, as hearing a delayed signal when you're singing or playing an instrument is completely unacceptable. Keep in mind that the main downside to a lower buffer size is that the computer is more susceptible to crashing. Conversely, higher buffer sizes increase latency, but the computer is less likely to crash, which is why it's best to use high buffer sizes when you're mixing a song. Comping. Comping means that you choose the best parts from several takes and compile them into one great take. This is a process that is used a lot on big records, particularly with vocals, because you often find that you like different takes for different reasons. This is kind of what it looks like. I will tell you that although this process can be time-consuming, the result is almost always worth it. Also, keep in mind that comping works well with instrument parts, like comping multiple guitar solos into one fluid performance. Compression. Naturally, compression utilizes a compressor, which is a tool that evens out the dynamic range of a signal. Essentially, you're reducing a signal's output volume in relation to its input volume, and you're doing this with controls that include ratio, threshold, attack, and release. The ratio shows how much compression is applied, while the threshold dictates how loud the signal has to be in order for that compression to be applied. The attack determines how quickly the compressor kicks in, and the release determines how soon the compression will stop once the signal goes below the threshold. There are lots of different compression types, and the subject could take up a whole video. But a general rule of thumb is to apply gentle compression for subtle changes and rely more on what your ears are hearing than what your eyes are seeing. Limiter. A limiter is like a compressor in that it reduces the level of a signal, but it's different in that it does not use ratios to control reduction. You set an absolute overall output level that you don't want your audio to surpass, and the limiter will hold to that upper limit. Typically, you'd use a limiter during the mastering stage of a song to increase the perceived volume of a track. But like compression, it takes some fine-tuning and a lot of experience to get your audio sounding just right with a limiter. Well, that's it for our very short video on audio lingo for beginner engineers. Thanks so much for watching. This is AB from B&H, and I'll see you next time.